What would you do if you received a final request from a patient in a vegetative state that would shake his family? Olivia walked through the hospital corridors, feeling the weight of the surroundings. The cold metal of the walls, the sterile glow of the fluorescent lights, and the silence that seemed to scream the loneliness of the patients in the palliative care unit enveloped her like a heavy cloak. Each step echoed her determination, but also brought up memories she preferred to forget. The young nurse had chosen this profession for a reason many did not understand. The loss of her grandmother, a central figure in her life, had pushed her toward the path of care and comfort. However, despite her dedication, the hospital always reminded her of the fragility of life. Olivia had seen the cycle of arrival and departure repeat countless times, and each time it made her more aware of the brevity of existence. The strong smell of antiseptic mixed with the subtle scent of flowers brought by relatives in hope, or perhaps in farewell, created a paradoxically desolate and comforting atmosphere. The sight of immobile patients, caught between life and death, was a constant reminder of what awaited her with each shift. As she headed to the break room to start her shift, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that, somehow, she was connected to those she cared for. She felt a responsibility that went beyond physical care. She wanted to provide comfort, to be the beacon in the darkness her patients faced. But at the same time, the shadow of her grandmother loomed over her, as if every life that passed through her hands was an echo of the loss that had marked her soul. Lost in these thoughts, Olivia grabbed her uniform and prepared to face another shift. With each movement, from putting on her lab coat to securing her hair in a tight bun, she reinforced her resolve. She took a deep breath, looked at herself in the mirror for a moment longer than usual, and left the room ready for another day. But deep down, she knew something was different that day, a feeling she couldn't quite name. When she finally arrived at the unit, she found the team busy with their usual tasks but noticed a tension in the air. There was something beyond the usual in the cold atmosphere of that morning. A subtle, almost imperceptible tension that sharpened her senses. Olivia didn't know what to expect, but she felt that somehow the day would put her on an unexpected path, something that would test not only her skills as a nurse but also her own humanity. Olivia was assigned to care for a new patient that morning. Mr. Arthur, a man who had been in a coma for over a year. As she read his medical chart for the first time, she was surprised to find that, despite his terminal state, he still received frequent visits from his family. The young nurse was used to patients whose families drifted away over time, unable to cope with the prolonged pain. But something about Mr. Arthur kept his loved ones close, a mystery that piqued Olivia's curiosity. Entering Mr. Arthur's room, she was greeted by the soft sound of machines monitoring his vital signs. The dim light streaming through the window illuminated the motionless figure of the gray-haired man. Olivia approached the bed carefully, observing every detail of the environment. Beside the bed, a small table displayed a few wilted flowers, a nearly empty bottle of water, and most strikingly, a framed family photo. In the picture, Arthur looked younger and full of life, surrounded by 3 children and a smiling woman. Olivia picked up the photo and studied it for a few moments, trying to imagine the life that man had led. Arthur's serene expression in the photo contrasted sharply with the reality before her, and it made her wonder what had brought him to this state. There was something about that family that seemed hidden in the shadows, something that made her feel an inexplicable connection to the man, even without knowing him. "You must have so many stories to tell, Mr. Arthur," Olivia murmured as she adjusted the sheets around him. It was common for her to speak to her patients, even those who couldn't respond. For her, it was a way to create a bond, to humanize the care. As she gently touched Mr. Arthur's hand, she felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't just the usual coldness of a comatose patient's skin. It was as if, for a brief moment, he had reacted to her touch. Throughout the day, Olivia returned to Arthur's room several times, adjusting the equipment and checking his condition. Each time she entered, she felt more intrigued. The connection she had felt upon seeing the photo did not diminish. On the contrary, it seemed to grow. During a break, as she rested in the adjacent room for a moment, she couldn't shake the image of the happy family from her mind. "What happened to you, Mr. Arthur?" she wondered, feeling a growing need to learn more about him. At the end of her shift, as she prepared to leave the hospital, Olivia cast one last look at Mr. Arthur's room. Something was keeping her from walking away completely, as if she was destined to uncover more about the life of that man. Unbeknownst to her, she was about to become entangled in a story that would change everything, both for her and for Arthur's family. The early morning was silent, the hospital shrouded in twilight, when Olivia began her night shift. Fatigue was already starting to weigh on her shoulders, but something kept her alert, a persistent feeling that this night would be different. As usual, she made rounds through the rooms, ensuring that all the patients were stable. When she arrived at Mr. Arthur's room, she hesitated for a moment before entering. The atmosphere seemed charged, as if a silent storm was about to manifest. Olivia approached Arthur's bed, gently adjusting the sheets and checking the monitors. It was then that she heard something that made her stop instantly. A low, raspy sound, as if someone was trying to speak after a long silence. She leaned in, her heart racing, and realized the sound was coming from Mr. Arthur himself. He was mumbling, his lips moving slowly, almost imperceptibly. The young nurse couldn't believe what she was seeing. How could he, after so long in a coma, be trying to speak? "Mr. Arthur, what are you trying to say?" Olivia whispered, leaning her face closer to his to hear better. The words came out jumbled, disconnected, but one phrase managed to stand out amidst the mumbling. "My children, they need to know the truth. Ricardo knows everything." The impact of these words left Olivia frozen for a moment. Who was Ricardo? What was the truth he mentioned? She tried to encourage him to continue, but the effort seemed to drain the little strength Arthur had left. His words became even more indistinct, until he finally fell silent again, returning to the same state as before. Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. Those few words carried a weight she could not ignore. She tried to process what had just happened, but her mind spun with unanswered questions. What was Arthur trying to confess? And why now, after all this time? The nurse knew that something very important had been said, but the full message slipped through her fingers like sand. She found herself in a dilemma. Should she tell the family what she had heard, or keep the secret until she understood better what was happening? Several minutes passed before Olivia could compose herself. She couldn't let it go. She decided that the next morning, she would discuss what had occurred with the medical team. But deep down, she felt it wouldn't be enough. There was a secret there, a mystery that enveloped her in a way she couldn't explain. Arthur, even in his almost vegetative state, seemed to be crying out for help, and somehow, she felt responsible for understanding and revealing what he was trying to say. By the end of her shift, Olivia was exhausted but disturbed. The name Ricardo and the words "my children need to know the truth" echoed in her mind, along with the feeling that this revelation was just the beginning of something much larger. Leaving the hospital that morning, the young nurse knew she was about to dive into a story that would go far beyond her professional duties. The secret Arthur whispered that night was the first thread of a plot that would pull her into a world of mysteries, lies, and hidden truths. In the following days, Olivia couldn't shake the words Mr. Arthur had whispered that night from her mind. "My children, they need to know the truth. Ricardo knows everything," echoed in her thoughts during every free moment she had. She knew that, as a nurse, her role was to care for patients, but she felt that this confession was pushing her toward something greater. Curiosity and a sense of responsibility led her to start a discreet investigation, trying to understand what lay behind Arthur's words. Olivia began paying closer attention to Arthur's family visits, carefully observing their interactions. She soon noticed a subtle but constant tension during the meetings between Arthur's children. They avoided discussing certain topics, and an uncomfortable silence hung in the air whenever they were together. Miguel, the eldest son, seemed especially anxious, constantly checking his watch as if he wanted to leave as soon as possible. Clara, the middle daughter, appeared to be the most present and affectionate, while Anna, the youngest, showed a detachment that intrigued Olivia. During her observations, Olivia realized that, despite appearances, something was amiss in the family dynamics. Clara frequently asked Miguel if he was hiding something, which he denied firmly, but his eyes betrayed an inner conflict. Anna, on the other hand, almost never participated in conversations, preferring to stay on the sidelines as if something deeply troubled her. The nurse couldn't shake the feeling that the secret Arthur mentioned was directly related to the behavior of his children. Intrigued, Olivia began to investigate Arthur's medical records and any information that might be related to the family. She spoke with colleagues, trying to gather more details about the patient's history and the regular visits from his family. Although few knew anything concrete, everyone agreed that there was an odd tension among the children, especially when Ricardo's name came up in conversation. That name seemed to be a taboo, something no one wanted to discuss openly. Olivia knew she was treading dangerous ground. She was aware that her curiosity could lead to consequences, but she felt she couldn't ignore the situation. The desire to help Arthur's family, to perhaps uncover the truth he wanted his children to know, drove her actions. However, she constantly wondered if she was doing the right thing, if she should simply let the matter drop and focus on her work. Still, Olivia couldn't stop. Each passing day, she became more and more involved in the search for answers. She began to note the interactions she witnessed and the information she managed to gather. She was determined to discover what had happened and, if possible, help the family deal with whatever was hidden. But doubt lingered. Should she share what she knew with someone, or wait until she was certain her suspicions were correct? As she struggled with these questions, Olivia realized that her investigation was taking a more serious turn. She felt she was approaching a truth that could deeply impact the lives of those involved. And at the same time, she knew that once this truth came to light, there would be no turning back. Days later, during another of her observations, Olivia was walking down the corridor near Mr. Arthur's room when she heard familiar voices. Clara and Miguel were engaged in a tense conversation, their whispers almost imperceptible, but something in their words caught Olivia's attention. She approached cautiously, hiding behind the partially open door. They were discussing an old letter, something that seemed to have been found recently, and the mention of a name made Olivia's heart race. "Ricardo. I still can't believe we found this," Clara said, her voice laden with disbelief and apprehension. "A letter addressed to Ricardo, written by our father. How is that possible?" Miguel sighed, visibly disturbed. "This explains a lot, Clara. I always knew something was off, but I never imagined he was hiding something so significant from us." The words caught in Olivia's throat. Ricardo was once again at the center of everything, and now there was a letter that connected Arthur to him in a more concrete way. Clara held the letter in her hands, looking at it as if it weighed a ton. He mentions an old debt, something that was left pending between him and Ricardo, but the worst part is that there's a hint about one of us being his child. Clara's last sentence hit like a bomb, and Olivia had to hold herself back from entering the room at that moment. The letter suggested that one of Arthur's children might not actually be his, and that Ricardo had known the truth from the beginning. The revelation left Clara and Miguel in shock, and the same was true for Olivia, hidden outside. She could hardly believe what she had heard. The young nurse knew that this discovery changed everything. The dynamics between the siblings, the tension she had always felt, everything now made sense. Arthur had kept this secret for years, and Ricardo, the man whose name had been haunting her thoughts, seemed to be the key to understanding the whole story. "We need to decide what to do with this," Miguel said, his voice laden with uncertainty. "If we tell Anna, it might destroy our family. But if we don't, we'll be keeping a lie that might be even worse." Clara nodded, but the anguish in her eyes showed that there were no easy answers. They stared at each other for a few moments before Clara tucked the letter into her bag, as if she wanted to hide not only the piece of paper, but the very truth it contained. As the two siblings left the room, Olivia remained in the corridor, her heart pounding. She knew she needed to think carefully about what to do next. The letter Clara and Miguel had found seemed to confirm what Arthur had tried to reveal in his final moments of clarity. However, the weight of knowing something so devastating left her conflicted. Should she continue with her investigation and try to uncover more? Or was it time to share what she knew with the family? Deep down, Olivia understood that any decision she made would have profound consequences. The truth about the paternity of one of Arthur's children could either unite or destroy the family forever. As she walked through the hospital corridors, lost in thought, Olivia realized she was more involved than she had ever imagined, and she knew that now there was no turning back. Olivia spent the following days reflecting on what she had witnessed. The revelation of the secret letter continued to haunt her, and the pressure to decide what to do only grew. She knew that keeping this secret could prolong the family's pain, but she also feared that revealing it without proper precautions could cause irreparable harm. Among the siblings, Clara seemed to be the most emotionally strong, the most balanced. Olivia felt that if anyone in the family could handle this truth and use it for good, it would be Clara. One afternoon, after much deliberation, Olivia decided she could no longer carry the burden alone. She took advantage of a moment when Clara was alone in the room with Mr. Arthur, lost in thought beside her father. Taking a deep breath, the nurse entered the room and, with a serious look, asked to speak privately. Clara, sensing the urgency in Olivia's tone, agreed without hesitation. They left together and walked to an empty break room, where Olivia closed the door, creating a confidential space. Clara, I need to tell you something that happened a few days ago. Olivia began, her voice low and careful. Clara frowned, clearly worried. During one of my night shifts, your father, he whispered some words. He said you needed to know the truth and mentioned Ricardo's name. I didn't fully understand at the time, but later, when I heard you and Miguel talking about the letter, Olivia paused, searching for the right words. I felt I should tell you what I heard because it seems very important. Something your father wanted you to know. Clara was silent for a few moments, absorbing Olivia's words. She seemed to be battling a wave of emotions, her eyes fixed on the floor as she processed what the nurse had revealed. When she finally spoke, her voice was tinged with a mix of sadness and determination. I knew there was something more, but hearing this, it confirms my suspicions. What's happening with our family is bigger than I imagined. Olivia watched Clara with empathy, recognizing the weight of the responsibility she had just transferred to her. I know it's not easy, but I felt you had the right to know. The truth is coming to light somehow, and maybe now you can decide how to handle it. I'm here to help if you need it. The sincerity in Olivia's words touched Clara, who looked up with eyes now filled with gratitude. Thank you, Olivia, Clara said, her voice steady despite the inner turmoil. I know it couldn't have been easy for you to tell me this, but I also know that if my father tried to warn us, it's because he wants the truth to come out. I will talk to Miguel and Ana. They need to know even if it's difficult. Olivia nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. She knew this was just the beginning of a series of revelations and confrontations the family would have to face. As Clara prepared to tell her siblings, Olivia realized she had made the right decision. Trusting Clara was necessary for the truth to be revealed with the care and love Arthur wished for his family. However, there was still a long road ahead, and Olivia knew the journey would be painful but necessary. She just hoped that, in the end, the family would find the peace they so desperately needed. Clara knew that the conversation she was about to have with her siblings would be one of the most difficult of her life. For days, she had mentally rehearsed the words she would use, but nothing seemed adequate for revealing the secret she carried. When she finally decided to speak, she chose an afternoon when everyone could be together, away from the hospital, in the comfort of the home where they had grown up. The weather outside was cloudy, as if the sky reflected the weight of the revelations to come. Miguel and Ana arrived unsuspecting, only concerned with their father's condition. As they settled into the living room, Clara felt the tension rise in the air. Taking a deep breath, she decided to get straight to the point. There's something I need to tell you, she began, her voice firm but laden with emotion. Miguel and Ana exchanged surprised glances at the seriousness of their sister's tone. It's about Dad, and about us, she continued, pulling the letter from her bag and placing it on the table in front of them. Clara, what is this? Ana asked, discomfort evident on her face. Clara hesitated for a moment before answering, knowing that every word to follow would change their lives forever. This letter was written by Dad many years ago, and it was addressed to a man named Ricardo. It reveals a secret he kept from us all this time. The secret is about the paternity of one of us. The shock on Miguel and Anna's faces was palpable. Miguel, always the most pragmatic, took the letter with trembling hands and began to read. As he read, his face hardened. "It can't be," he murmured, looking at Clara for any explanation that might soften the blow. But there was none. Anna, in turn, was frozen, as if her world had crumbled. What does this mean? Who is this Ricardo? And what was Dad hiding from us? Her voice trembled as the questions poured out, with no answers in sight. Clara took a deep breath, trying to remain calm in the face of the chaos she had just unleashed. "I don't know all the details, but Dad mentioned that Ricardo knows everything. He said we needed to know the truth before it was too late." Anna, trying to process the information, shook her head in denial, while Miguel finally set the letter aside, looking at his sisters with a mixture of pain and determination. "If Ricardo knows everything, we need to find him," Miguel said, his voice now firmer. "We need to know who among us is his child. And we need to understand why Dad kept this from us for so long." Clara nodded, knowing this was the only way to get to the bottom of the mystery. "But whatever happens, we're a family, and nothing will change that," Miguel added, looking into his sister's eyes for the same resolve. Anna, still shaken, nodded in agreement. "We have to know the truth, no matter how painful." Her words echoed in the room, sealing the family's fate. They had been thrust into a painful journey, where the answers they would find could change their lives forever. And yet, they all felt it was necessary. As the three siblings prepared to confront the truth, Olivia, back at the hospital, felt that the storm Arthur had tried to avoid was finally about to break. She knew that the next step would be crucial, and that, one way or another, everyone would be changed forever. With heavy hearts and minds full of uncertainty, the siblings decided that the only way to move forward was to find Ricardo and confront him with the truth. The clues they had were few, but Miguel, determined, began searching for information about the man who seemingly knew everything about Arthur's secret. After some phone calls and discreet searches, they finally managed to get an address. Ricardo lived in a small town a few hours away. They decided to go together, believing that it would be the best way to handle what was to come. The trip was silent, each lost in their thoughts, trying to imagine what that meeting would bring to light. Clara, always the mediator, felt the responsibility of maintaining peace, while Miguel mentally prepared for a conversation that could change everything. Anna, still visibly shaken, tried to stay strong, but anxiety was clear in her eyes. When they arrived at the simple house where Ricardo lived, they stood in front of the door for a few minutes, exchanging glances that spoke more than words. Miguel, taking the lead, knocked on the door. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, the door opened, revealing a tired-looking man, but with eyes that still held a spark of vitality. Ricardo seemed surprised to see the three of them there, but his expression quickly turned to something between sadness and resignation. "I knew this day would come," he said, his voice carrying the weight of years of silence. "Please, come in." The siblings entered the small living room, where time seemed to have stopped. Old photos on the walls, worn-out furniture. Everything indicated a life lived with simplicity and nostalgia. Ricardo invited them to sit and, without beating around the bush, began to speak. Arthur was always a man of principles, but there was something he feared more than anything: hurting you. And that's why he decided to keep the truth hidden, hoping you would never need to know. Ricardo's voice was calm but laden with emotion. "But what exactly happened?" Clara asked, trying to control her anxiety. Ricardo sighed deeply before continuing. "Many years ago, Arthur and I were very close. I made a mistake that he could never completely forgive. The truth is that one of you is not his biological child, but mine." The words hung in the air, leaving the siblings in shock. Clara brought her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back tears, while Anna looked at Ricardo as if he could offer some explanation that would make it easier to accept. Arthur asked me to keep the secret, to never tell you. He loved you all as if you were his own children, but he feared that if the truth came out, it would destroy the family he fought so hard to keep together. Ricardo looked at the three of them, pain clear in his eyes. I never wanted to interfere in your lives, but I think you deserve to know, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Miguel, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. Do you know which one of us is your biological child? The question seemed to echo in the small room, the air growing even heavier. Ricardo nodded slowly. Yes, I know. But before I say anything, I want you to understand that, for Arthur, it never mattered. You were always and will always be his children. Ricardo's words brought a bittersweet comfort, but also a sense of urgency. Am I your daughter? Anna asked, her voice barely audible, fearing the answer. Ricardo looked directly at her, his eyes reflecting deep sadness. Anna, you are Arthur's biological daughter. The truth he kept, the truth I kept secret, is that Clara is my daughter. The revelation hit like a bomb, shattering certainties and bringing forth a new reality. Anna felt a mix of relief and guilt, while Clara faced a new identity, a new father. The ensuing silence was heavy and painful. Seeing the pain his words had caused, Ricardo got up and approached Clara. I know this isn't easy to hear, but I want you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. But what matters most is the love Arthur had for all of you. He did everything he could to protect you, and that's what you should remember. Ricardo's words were true, but they did not lessen the impact of the revelation. The siblings, now faced with a new truth, knew they still had a long road ahead. Reconciliation and understanding would be difficult, but with time, they might find a new balance, a new way to be family, even with the truths that had been uncovered. The days following the confrontation with Ricardo were marked by a mix of pain and reflection. Each sibling, in their own way, tried to process the new reality that had been imposed on them. The revelation about Clara's true parentage had deeply shaken everyone, but at the same time, it sparked a desire to reconnect and find a path to forgiveness and acceptance. Olivia, observing from a distance, knew that this was a delicate moment, and more than ever, her role was to offer silent support. Clara was the first to attempt to reestablish contact with her siblings. She knew that silence could create a chasm between them, and that was the last thing she wanted. With a heart full of uncertainty, she suggested that they write a joint letter to their father, expressing their feelings and, in a way, seeking reconciliation. The idea was met with hesitation, but Miguel and Anna, despite the pain, agreed that it was the best course of action. They knew that Arthur, even in a coma, deserved to know that they held no grudges and still loved him as the father he had always been to them. Together, they sat at the table in the room where so many memories had been made and began to write the letter. Each one contributed their words, filled with emotion and sincerity. Clara wrote about her gratitude for the love she had received over the years, even knowing now that Arthur was not her biological father. Miguel, always the most pragmatic, wrote about the respect he had for Arthur and how he had always been a model of strength and dedication. Anna, still processing the revelation, wrote about the affection she felt and how she wanted him to know that she was trying to accept the truth, no matter how painful it was. When they finished, the letter was a mix of pain and hope, a reflection of the healing process that was beginning to take shape. Olivia, who had followed the process from a distance, offered to read the letter by Arthur's bedside. The siblings agreed, feeling that it would bring some comfort to their father, even in his unconscious state. That afternoon, with a racing heart, Olivia entered Arthur's room and sat by his bed. With the letter in hand, she began to read, her soft voice filling the silence of the room. As she read, she felt Arthur's presence in an almost tangible way. The words of his children, filled with love and forgiveness, seemed to resonate in the room, as if Arthur could somehow feel them. Olivia read each line carefully, allowing the siblings' emotions to fully express themselves. When she finished, a deep silence filled the room, but it was no longer a heavy silence. There was a sense of peace, as if something within Arthur, even in his unconscious state, had found some form of closure. Olivia sat by his side for a few more minutes, holding his hand gently. She knew that this moment was important not only for Arthur but also for his children, who were beginning to reconcile with the past and accept the truth, no matter how painful it was. When she finally stood up, she felt a wave of gratitude for having been part of this process, for helping the family find a path to forgiveness. As they left the hospital, the siblings were more united. The revelation about Clara's parentage was still an open wound, but together, they were determined to move forward, honoring the legacy of love and sacrifice that Arthur had left them. With time, they knew that the pain would lessen and that they could build a new story based on the truth and the love that had always united them. And so, they began to take the first steps towards moving forward, ready to face the future with courage and unity. Days after reading the letter to Arthur, the inevitable happened. Arthur's heart, which had resisted for so long, finally gave out, and he passed away in peace, surrounded by the love of the children he cherished so much. The news of his death brought deep sadness but also a strange relief. It was as if, finally, he had found the serenity he had sought all those years of silence and secrecy. The farewell ceremony was planned to be simple, just as Arthur would have wanted. The siblings decided to hold it in the garden of the house where they grew up, a place full of happy memories. It was a sunny day, with a light breeze that seemed to gently caress the surroundings, as if even the weather was respecting the moment of farewell. Close friends and a few neighbors attended, but the focus was on the family, on the bonds that, despite everything, proved unbreakable. As the guests settled in, Clara, Miguel, and Ana stood together, silent but united in an invisible bond of understanding and support. They had weathered an emotional storm but were determined to move forward as a family, regardless of the painful truths they had uncovered. Olivia, who had become a crucial figure for them, was also present, watching from a distance but ready to offer any necessary support. The ceremony began with a few words from the family's former pastor, who reminded everyone of the upright and loving man Arthur had always been. But it was when Clara stood up to speak that the emotion truly took hold. "My father was a man of few words but great actions. He taught us the importance of love, respect, and family. Today, more than ever, I realize that his greatest legacy is not in the material things he left behind but in the values he passed on to us. Despite the difficulties and the secrets he carried, I never doubted the love he had for us." Miguel and Ana also shared their memories, recalling moments of affection and teachings that Arthur had given them. Each word spoken, each memory shared, seemed to ease a bit of the pain, transforming it into a feeling of gratitude. Arthur's love for his children was something that, even in light of the recent revelations, remained unwavering. This love, they realized, was what would sustain them going forward. After the speeches, the siblings decided to plant a tree in the garden as a symbol of renewal and continuity. As they placed the sapling in the ground, they felt that, in a way, they were also planting the seeds of a new beginning. The tree would grow and flourish over time, just as they hoped the family would also strengthen and blossom despite the adversities. It was a simple act but filled with meaning, representing the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. At the end of the ceremony, as the guests began to disperse, Clara, Miguel, and Ana stayed together for a few moments, in silence, looking at the newly planted tree. They didn't need words. The understanding between them was clear. The journey they had faced had changed them, but it had also united them in a new, deeper way. They knew that, despite everything, family was what truly mattered, and they were ready to move forward, supporting one another. Olivia, watching from afar, felt a wave of satisfaction. Arthur's family had found a way to reconcile with the past and move forward, and she knew she had fulfilled her role. As she said goodbye to the siblings, she felt a sense of closure but also of a new beginning, both for them and for herself. The experience with Arthur and his family left a profound mark on Olivia's life. As she observed the unfolding events, from the discovery of the secret to the final reconciliation, she found herself reflecting on the true meaning of her profession. Until then, Olivia had viewed nursing primarily as a physical care job, but she now understood that her role went far beyond that. By accompanying that family through their most vulnerable moments, Olivia realized that emotional and spiritual healing was just as important as physical healing. After Arthur's farewell ceremony, Olivia spent days contemplating the impact that experience had on her. The young nurse had always taken pride in her capacity for empathy, but this experience made her realize that it was possible to go even deeper. It was not enough to just offer comfort. It was necessary to be an active presence in the emotional journey of patients and their families, helping them face fears, pains, and difficult truths. As she continued her work at the hospital, Olivia began to approach her patients and their families differently. She became more attentive to emotional needs, more willing to listen to what was not said in words, but was expressed in looks, gestures, and silences. By doing so, she found that she could create deeper connections that aided both in the healing process and in accepting the harsh realities many faced. Arthur's case also led her to reflect on her own life and the secrets we sometimes keep, believing that we protect those we love, but which may actually cause more pain when revealed. Olivia wondered if there was something in her own life that needed to be resolved, something that, if left unaddressed, could become a burden in the future. This introspection led her to reassess her relationships, striving to be more open and honest, especially with those she loved. The relationship she built with Clara, Miguel, and Ana also transformed her. Seeing how, despite the pain and revelations, they managed to unite, Olivia learned the value of resilience and forgiveness. It made her think about how forgiveness is not just a gift we give to others, but also something we need to offer to ourselves, so that we can move forward without the burdens of the past. Olivia also began to understand that each patient was a unique story, filled with emotions, secrets, and experiences that went beyond what was in the medical records. This new perspective made her feel a deep gratitude for the opportunity to be part of these stories, to help people not only confront their illnesses but also find peace and resolution in their lives. Over time, Olivia realized that this experience had made her a more complete nurse, more aware of the power she had to positively influence people's lives. She felt renewed, with a new mission, to be not just a caregiver but also a guide for those who, in their most difficult moments, needed a helping hand to navigate emotional storms. And so, Olivia moved forward, certain that Arthur and his family's story had transformed her forever, both in her personal life and her career. Months had passed since Arthur's death, and life at the hospital had returned to its usual rhythm. However, for Olivia, nothing was quite the same. One quiet afternoon, while organizing some materials in the break room, she came across an old photo of Arthur. It was a faded image, captured during a moment of happiness, probably at the country house he cherished. In the photo, Arthur was surrounded by his young children, all smiling, unaware of the future that awaited them. Olivia picked up the photo carefully, feeling a wave of nostalgia and reflection. The journey she had shared with Arthur's family was one of the most intense of her career. And now, looking at that image, she realized how much she had learned and grown. The young nurse recalled every detail: the sleepless nights, the silent conversations with Arthur, the tears shed by Clara, Miguel, and Ana, and finally, the relief they all felt upon finding some semblance of peace. With the photo in her hands, Olivia reflected on how Arthur and his family's story had transformed her. It wasn't just about discovering a secret, but about the power of love, forgiveness, and truth. This experience taught her that in her profession, care extends beyond the physical. It's necessary to be present to help heal the invisible wounds that often hurt more than those that are seen. Even in his absence, Arthur continued to be a positive influence in her life, a symbol of the impact that human connections can have. Olivia put the photo in her bag, determined to keep it as a reminder of the importance of her work. The image was not just a memory of the past, but also an inspiration for the future. She knew that other stories would come, each with its own complexities and challenges, and she was ready to face them with the same commitment and empathy she had shown with Arthur and his family. As days turned into weeks, Olivia continued to perform her role at the hospital with renewed vigor. Each patient she encountered was an opportunity to apply what she had learned, to be not just a caregiver but a confidant, a guide through the pains and joys of life. She knew she couldn't solve all problems, but she could be present, offering her support when it was most needed. By closing the chapter with Arthur's family, Olivia also closed a chapter in her own life, ready to start another. The photo of Arthur was now a symbol of everything she had experienced and learned. Keeping it was her way of honoring the memory of a man who, even in silence, taught her so much about life, love, and the importance of always seeking the truth, no matter how painful it might be. And so, with a sense of closure, Olivia moved forward, ready for the new challenges and stories that life would bring, carrying with her the certainty that each experience, no matter how difficult, would help her become an even better nurse and person.